Hey guys, this is Ron. First, let me say Happy Thanksgiving to you all and your families. I hope that your day is peaceful and full of fun times. I'm taking the week off to enjoy my family, but don't think for a minute that I would leave you podcastless. We have a replay for you that first aired in March of 2015. Now I have a good feeling that you're going to enjoy this one. Happy Thanksgiving. Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. Ron, again with the music change? Really? Well, this time the music indicates we have a real roundup for you. Mike McNeff is here to help us introduce a classic Western episode of GunSmoke. Also, we have a few emails and a horse race you will not want to miss. So let's get this started with... What's that you say? Lori Swan wants to know, what's the best place to listen to Ron's Amazing Stories? Well, Lori, the best place is wherever you are. And you might think I'm trying to be funny, but in reality, I am on so many different platforms now that pretty much anywhere you are, you can listen to me. If you have an iPod, you can go to iTunes. If you want to listen on your phone, you got Stitcher Radio and TuneIn Radio. So what I would recommend is to head to the main website at raspodcast.com and take a look at all the different places that you can find Ron's Amazing Stories. Jenna89 asks, is that your real voice? Do you do anything to make it, well, so cool? Are you an actor? Well, I've had that question before, and I guess it's worth a repeat. No, this is not my real voice. If I use the real one, well, let's just say things would be bad. Here is a sample of what I really sound like. Now, I'm not sure how that translates in the podcast world, but as you can hear, it's better if I fake it. Josh Knows tweeted this one to me. I just started a new podcast. How do I get you to mention my show on your show? Well, Josh, that's a great question. And it's difficult to answer because if you had sent me that with the name of your show and when it's on and where they could find it, I might have given you a plug right here. So, best way to do that is just send me the info and we'll go from there. Thanks for your interest, everyone. That's enough of that for right now. Let's get to the main event. With us today, we have a retired SWAT commander, a lawyer, an author, a musician, and a Western lore expert. Now, you might think I have a whole room of amazing people, but what if I told you it was all one guy, Mr. Mike McNeff? Mike, welcome back to the podcast.
Glad to be here, Ron. It's always fun to be with you.
Did I miss anything?
No, that's funny.
I got it all this time.
Yeah.
Well, so last time you were here, we found out about your Western background. You were here talking about your book, Hard Justice, which, by the way, is an excellent story. And I thought it would be great to have you come back and introduce a Western for us. And to my happiness, you agreed.
I did, and because it's a favorite of mine. And, there is one thing I forgot to tell you. I did spend about 2 years of my life working on a cattle ranch.
Oh, you did?
I did, with real cowboys, and it was one of the most greatest experiences of my life.
So not only are you an expert of the way of the cowboy, you've personally experienced it.
I have.
So let me ask my first question. Here it is.
Okay.
Did cowboys really carry guns, all of them? Did they always have guns strapped to them wherever they went?
Real cowboys did. Now, it wasn't so much for fighting other cowboys or so much as fighting other people, but out in the middle of nowhere can be a rough business, especially with wild animals. And there were outlaws running around out there. But it was generally a tool because it could be used not only for defense, but for hunting, for food, and also could be used as a signaling device. So there was many cowboys looked at all the things that they carried as a tool. If it wasn't useful, they didn't carry it.
Huh. So now the modern cowboy, did he always carry something with him, a rifle, a gun?
Well, no, not really. I mean, we had trucks, we had radios. Didn't worry too much about the things that the guys in the Old West had to worry about.
Was the Indian as big a threat as the movies make out in those early years of, let's say, 1880s? Were they as big a threat as the TV and movies tell us they were?
They were to certain parts of the West and in like waves. It wasn't a constant threat. There was more than one time when peace would be made between certain tribes and the white guys. Unfortunately, the white folks back then tended to cheat more than the Indians did.
Oh, wow.
Was trying to take advantage of the Indians, and the Indians weren't stupid. And so when they felt like they were taken advantage of, they would get angry and we'd be back on again.
What was life like for an Indian back in the 1880s when GunSmoke and all those great westerns pull their stories from, supposedly? What was the American Indian doing at that time?
Well, they had their villages, and some of them were very large because there was confederations of tribes that joined forces, and not only to resist the movement of Europeans and Americans across the West, but it's protection also against other warlike tribes. There was a strange mix of peaceful tribes and warlike tribes going on in the West. So a lot of tribes would form these confederations just for self-preservation. So you would have small communities, large communities, and they went about their life mostly in the early times hunting, but then agriculture came in, and so a lot of Indian tribes fed themselves to agriculture of corn and other staples such as that. But hunting and agriculture, they just lived their lives not really looking to do like the Europeans did and the Americans trying to find a fortune. They just wanted to lead their natural life with the earth and nature.
Did the Apache deserve their reputation? What was the real truth there?
Yeah, they were a fierce tribe. They were fierce fighters. But the whole thing, why they fought is because they felt like they were losing their land. I mean, and they were.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to understand, and certain lawsuits have brought forth this in modern times where you have court decisions giving Indians certain rights on hunting and fishing that coincided with their old hunting grounds and fishing grounds back then. So, we both live in Washington. There was huge cases decided in favor of the tribes in that regard.
Yeah.
So the idea that the American Indians stayed in one place or that their little village was the limit to their what they claimed to be their land is a myth. They roamed where the hunting was, where the fishing was, where they could get food.
Getting back to the Apache, they were not only a warlike race, but they were also the horsemen of the plains, weren't they? Am I wrong about that? Or
no, you're right about that. And they were also, at the time, probably the finest guerrilla fighters in the world.
I bring that up because we are going to have a story today from GunSmoke. And part of that story deals with their ponies and the strength of their ponies. And there's been so many stories about the Wild Mustang and that era and how that horse was so underrated that no one really even knew the full potential of the pony then. Fair assessment, or am I off again?
No, that is a fair assessment. I've been doing some research into Lewis and Clark's expedition. You find that Lewis and Clark traded their American ponies for Indian ponies because the American horses just couldn't keep up with the land and the hard pull they had to do to cross the areas they were crossing. So they went to the more sturdy and stronger Indian ponies.
Talking about, the horses that we had, were our horses bigger, faster, stronger, or were they just... Because they always refer to Indian horses as these little Mustangs. Or were they already here as well, I guess is...
The horse was introduced to America by the conquistadors. From Mexico, they spread up into the plains and further west. Some of the breeds were brought over from Europe, but the vast majority of the bloodlines of the horses in the United States came from the horses that the Spanish brought over.
Where did the thoroughbreds come in then? The big race horses and whatnot. Where did they come in?
Well, what the Europeans brought to the horse, planned breeding, to breed and to interbreed horses to get certain qualities to do certain things.
I see.
And that's how thoroughbreds were developed, quarter horses were developed, and all these things was through breeding. What the Indian pony got was not exactly pampered treatment. They were, another tool the Indians needed to live their lives, and it allowed them to broaden their hunting grounds and gave them ways to haul their kills back without breaking their own backs. And so the Indian pony was just so sturdy because they weren't fed a lot and they were worked hard.
Do you believe that there were horses at that time that were just built for speed and running?
Well, not exactly just built for speed and running, because horses had to do a lot more in the West.
Yeah, that's my thought.
But it is very conceivable that a lieutenant in the Army who maybe came from a wealthy family or a well-to-do family brought a horse with him when he came into the Army that was bred for that, simply as a matter of ego. And that lieutenant that we're talking about is really not atypical of all young lieutenants.
The one in our story that we're going to hear today.
That's correct.
That's right. So we do have a Western for you today, and it comes from the best Western drama of the golden age of radio, and that's my thought. But most agree that GunSmoke was special. Our story comes from the second season of the show, and it is called The Indian Horse, and it first aired May 15th, 1954.
Around Dodge City and in the territory out west, there's just one way to handle the killers and the spoilers, and that's with a U.S. Marshal and the smell of gun smoke. GunSmoke, starring William Conrad. Transcribed story of the violence that moved west with young America. The story of a man who moved with it. Matt Dillon, United States Marshal.
The peace officer of...
My gracious, Mr. Dillon, there's old Lank Dean. I haven't seen him in town for over a year.
You...
Got his wife with him, too.
And the wagon's filled with kids?
Well, how'd you know Lank had brung the kids along?
Well, he always does.
Oh.
That, John...
Hey, look, there's the Pilcher boys.
Pardon?
And way down there is Emma Gold.
Is
Ain't seen her in town for a spell either.
not in the area. Respectfully, Matt Dillon, U.S. Marshal. That does it. Chester,
Yes, sir?
Well, you shut the door. You're letting in all the flies in Kansas.
But, Mr. Dillon, I can't
Shut
just
the
go
door,
in.
Chester. You can go out or stay in, but shut the door.
Yes, sir. No, Mr. Dillon, this town's just busting with people. All here for the races tomorrow, I guess.
Yeah.
You going out to the flats tomorrow?
I don't know, Chester.
You don't sound like you hanker after going too much.
Well, I don't. I wish Colonel Benson's officers would forget about horse racing.
Well, I guess they figure their Army Greys are about the best horses in the country.
Well, everybody knows the cavalry has good horses. They don't have to prove it every 4 or 5 months.
Mr. Dillon, I just plain don't understand. Ain't nobody likes a horse race better than you.
I know, Chester. I like 'em fine, but that's not...
Marshal Dillon?
Yeah, that's right.
Lieutenant Flagg, sir, Fort Dodge.
Oh, sit down, Lieutenant.
Colonel Benson's compliments, sir. And he requests your presence at the fort tomorrow.
For the races.
That's right, sir. The colonel feels that a peace officer out there would be, well, a steadying influence.
I see. And, I take it you don't.
No, Marshal, I don't. We can police our own activities.
I see.
After all, we're certainly competent to handle a bunch of sodbusters.
Well, the last time there were races out at the fort, 3 men were shot. Is that how you would handle things, Lieutenant?
I wasn't stationed at Fort Dodge then, Marshal. But I know this. If people around here want to bet their stock against Army mounts, they shouldn't complain if they lose.
Mm-hmm. How long have you been out here, Lieutenant?
I was stationed in Virginia until 2 months ago.
Yeah, I thought so.
What do you mean?
Look, Lieutenant, out here, when men have something to complain about, they sometimes do it with a 6-gun. They don't all have the respect for the Army that you have.
They would if I had the say of it.
Well, maybe, but you don't.
It's like with the Indians. A lot of the junior officers feel as I do. We'd go after them, force them into the open.
And bring on another Indian war?
And we'd beat them.
But it would cost more than you'd believe, Lieutenant.
Not if the 3 I saw leaving Dodge a while back were any example. An old man on a shaggy gray pony and 2 young boys.
That was a Kiowa, Lieutenant. He's a chief, and those 2 braves are his sons. His name's Howling Dog.
You seem to know a good deal about Indians, Marshal.
Lieutenant Flagg, you're a young officer. You're ambitious and you're eager, but you talk too much, and you don't even know part of what you're talking about.
Now, look here.
Tell Colonel Benson I'll be out there tomorrow.
Very good, Marshal.
And, Lieutenant,
Yes?
I've known Howland Dog ever since I came to Kansas. He's old, but he isn't stupid. So, don't guess wrong about him.
His pa sure must have hated the world, Mr. Dillon.
Ah, he's young, Chester. He'll learn.
Yes, sir. But you know, sometimes fellas grow up and don't improve a bit.
Oh, there you are. Well, hello, Matt. Chester.
How are you, Doc?
I passed a young lieutenant on the way out. Is Chester enlisting in the Army, Matt? Oh, Chester in the Army.
my gracious, Doc.
What's on your mind, Doc?
Oh, well, just thought you'd know. I won't be around town tomorrow. I'm taking the day off.
Oh, is that so?
Yep, I'm going out to the fort for the races. Might even work up some business.
Thought you was taking the day off.
Chester. Say, Matt, that fella Hunter out there, regimental surgeon, you know.
Yeah?
Well, he thinks he's the only good doctor around these parts.
Well, ain't he?
He, oh, well. Now, Matt, if you were going to be out there, you might push a little practice my way. The last time, Hunter got 6 cases out of 7. The only man he let me have was dead.
Well, look, Doc, I'll tell you, if Lieutenant Flagg was running things, maybe we could arrange a whole massacre for you.
Well, who's Lieutenant Flagg?
The lieutenant you seen leaving.
Yeah, Colonel Benson sent him in, Doc. Seems I've got an official invitation just to make sure the civilian element don't get to shooting each other.
Oh, now, Matt, you don't think they'd do that again, do you?
No, Doc. If there's any trouble out there this time, it won't be the townspeople that started. It'll be Lieutenant Flagg and his crowd.
Oh, is that so? Well, how's that, Matt?
Well, he's got no use for anything but Army. And he'd just as soon shoot an Indian as see one.
Well?
Howland Dog's in this part of the country again, Doc.
Oh?
And I wouldn't be too surprised but what he shows up at the races tomorrow.
You'd think this was the first horse race ever run, Matt.
Yeah.
Seems like the betting's running high. Just talking to the Pilcher boys. They're betting everything they own on a Missouri mare they brought out here.
Well, I've seen her, Chester. She's a good mare.
Oh, I've never heard so much horse talk in my life as I have tonight. Pasterns, stifles, gaskins, forequarters, hindquarters, short couples, long barrels. Well, I tell you, Matt, it kind of makes a girl wonder.
Oh, don't you worry, Kitty. There'll be other nights.
Well, there better be. Hey, Matt, look there, coming in the door.
What?
Oh, it's that Lieutenant Flagg and some other officers.
Yeah. They're down here to fan the fire, I guess.
What do you mean?
Now, the more they get this crowd worked up, the higher the betting will be.
Oh,
Jinkies, I wish I had some money to bet.
Well, just be glad you haven't, Chester.
Good evening, Marshal.
Lieutenant Flagg, Miss Russell.
how do you do?
Miss Russell. Lieutenants Dryden, Lawson, Mao.
How do you do? Well, gentlemen, is anyone drinking?
I think we all are. Bartender, set out some glasses. You'll join us, won't you, Miss Russell?
Oh, why, thank you, Lieutenant.
You too, Marshal?
Well,
I think I'll just walk down to the other end of the bar, Mr. Dillon. It's crowded here.
Hey, you fellas from Fort Dodge, ain't you?
That's right.
You own some of them Army Grays that are going to run tomorrow?
We do.
Hey, well, my name's Pilcher, Cy Pilcher. I got some money to bet on my mare. I'll match her any way you say.
Well, I'll take your bet, Mr. Pilcher. Name it.
Gentlemen?
$500 silver. Run 3, 4, 500 yards.
That's a lot of money.
You mean you ain't got it?
I'll go with you, Flagg.
All right, it's a bet then.
Good. I'll see you tomorrow then. Out to the fort.
Well, gentlemen,
Easy as
here's
sticking a pig. That fella wouldn't know a horse from a Missouri mule.
Maybe that's what he's got.
From his looks, he could be running himself.
Here now, you dirty pig.
All right, hold it,
There
Pilcher.
ain't no man can name me like that.
Hold it, I said.
You, wearing a uniform, calling yourself a soldier. I was fighting outside of Atlanta while you were still nursing.
Listen, you...
All right. Now, that's enough. Now, Pilcher, you get down to the other end of the bar. And as for you, gentlemen, you better start back for the fort.
Now, look, Marshal, we don't have to take
Move. All of you.
Come on, Flagg. Let's go.
Well, at least they paid for the bottle before you ran them off. You want a drink?
No, Kitty, not for me. Thank you. You go ahead.
Look, Matt, you can't stop trouble every time before it starts.
No, I can't, Kitty. But I wish tomorrow was done with.
We will return for the second act of Gunsmoke in just a moment. But first, 3 burglars lucky at theft prove unlucky at gambling. To make matters worse, authorities catch up with them on their theft rap as well in the case of the cold dice on Gangbusters later tonight. Hear how Lady Luck refused to smile at a gang of free and easy crooks and how justice and the cops closed in on their escapades. Hear Gangbusters presented by CBS Radio later tonight on most of these stations. Now the second act of Gunsmoke.
Well, afternoon's most gone, Mr. Dillon. There hasn't been any trouble yet.
The whiskey isn't gone, though, and there's still a race to come. Flagg's been holding it off.
Yes, sir. Well, at least here on the finish line, we can see which way the money's going.
Matt! Oh, Matt!
Hello, Doc.
Well, we haven't seen you all afternoon, Doctor. Where you been?
Oh, well, just playing pinochle with some of the boys. Things have been dull, but they won't be in a minute.
Oh, why?
Flag and Pilcher are down there at the start now. You see them? The big race is due any minute.
Yeah. Chester.
Yes, sir?
You keep your eyes open. And as soon as they cross the finish line, you get to Pilcher, and I'll pick up Flag.
All right, sir.
Yeah, let's see. Any minute now. Any minute there'll be a... Here they come! Come on!
All right, get moving, Chester. I'll find Flag.
Yes, sir.
All right. Pardon me, will you... Excuse me, please. Yeah, will you pardon me, please?
Walk that horse good, Sergeant.
Well, Lieutenant, you got a fast horse there.
Fastest on the post.
Yeah. The Pilcher boys lost about everything they had just now.
You preaching at me, Marshal?
No, Lieutenant, I've seen horse races before.
Yeah, he won easy, Marshal.
I guess he did, Lieutenant Mall.
And he could have won from any other horse just as easy.
Maybe.
Well, Flag, you beat my mare. Thought maybe I might have won, but you got a good horse. Real good horse.
You getting ready to talk me out of my money?
You're not much of a man, but you got a good mount, and I'm paying you. Here. $500 silver. Come on, Tom, let's go home.
Well, Marshal, the races are over. The Army won and no trouble. You sorry?
I got no complaints, Lieutenant Flag.
Looks like the Colonel was worried about nothing. Thinking there might be some hotheads out here. Matter of fact, I was kind of hoping for some fun along with the running. Maybe you are a steadying influence, Marshal.
Now, you look here, young fella. Soldier boy or
Chester,
no soldier.
take it easy.
Hey, Flag. Look over there.
Well, if it isn't that old Kyle, a howling dog. Well, you want some fun?
Hey, why not?
Flag,
It's going to challenge him to a race, Marshal.
he's an old man, Lieutenant.
Come on, Mal. We'll go talk to him.
What are you going to do, Mr. Dillon?
Now, we'll go over, too. Flag's feeling mighty big right now and looking for trouble.
All right, sir. It looked to me like folks was all leaving a minute ago. Now they seem to be drifting back.
Yeah.
What do you think old Howling Dog is going to do?
I don't know, Chester.
This is Lieutenant Mao.
I know Army officers.
You speak good English for an Indian.
I am chief of tribe.
Chief? I hear you Kiowa ride good horses.
Yeah. Horses help us hunt.
And I hear they're fast. Now, you've been sitting here all afternoon. You saw the races.
Yeah, I saw.
You saw my horse run. You think any of your horses could beat him?
Yes.
Which one, Howling Dog? Your son's horses or the one you're riding?
Anyone.
Any one of these three? Here's one of them could run 400 yards and live.
All right. All right, now stop deviling him, Flag.
I'm not doing anything, Marshal. He tells me his horses can beat mine. I don't think they can.
If you want a race, set one up, but don't fun him.
Will you race my horse, Howling Dog?
I will race
Which horse?
the one I ride.
Hey, Flag, you ever see a sorrier sheep?
You want to bet on the race, Howling Dog?
Kiowa got no money.
Well, you must have something.
If I lose, I give you a horse.
I wouldn't want it. But I'll take that little beaded sack you're wearing around your neck.
Yeah, that Indian medicine.
You say you could beat me, so there's nothing to worry about.
If I lose, I give Army man medicine sack.
Good. Well, I'll get Sergeant Crockett to bring my horse over here, will you?
I'll be right back.
Now, Howling Dog,
What distance do we race?
You say.
All right. We'll race from here down to that wagon with the broken wheel and back again. That's about 500 yards. Marshal, you can mark the start and finish.
All right. Now, Holland Dog, do you understand? From here to the wagon and then back again. The first man to pass me coming back wins.
Yeah.
Here you are, Flag. Had a chance to blow. Good shape.
Good.
Lieutenant Mao, would you step over here a minute? I'd like to talk to you.
Sure, Marshal.
You ready, Chief?
I am ready.
You can ride dressed like that?
Yes.
Okay, Marshal. Fine with me. Hey, Flag. That Indian gonna ride in his blanket?
You can ride in a tent for all I care.
Army man,
Yes?
what you give me when I win?
When you... What do you want? Money?
No.
What then?
Uniform.
Yeah. You mean what I'm wearing?
Yes.
Well,
Why not, Flag? What difference does it make? He won't win anyway.
all right. It's a bet, Chief.
Just a minute, Lieutenant.
What is it, Pilcher?
Well, my horse couldn't do it. Maybe the Chief's can. I ain't got any money left, but I'll bet my saddles and wagon and 4 mules against 500.
It's a bet.
All right, Chester.
Yes, sir.
You hold the money, huh?
Yes, sir. And I might just take about $5 on the Indian, too, Lieutenant.
It's a bet.
Anybody else?
I've done all right today. I'll take 100.
Well, you're a fool, but now that's a bet.
As soon as I'm mounted, I'll be ready, Marshal.
All right. You ready, Howland Dog?
Ready.
All right, now to that wagon and back across this line, then. You there, would you ride down and clear those people out of the way, please? All right, move up on the line. Now I'll fire 1 shot. All right, steady now.
Look at him go, Mr. Dillon. Come on, Howling Dog. Can he do it?
I don't know, Chester.
Looks like Flag's ahead.
Now he's swinging wide for the wagon.
Looky there, that ugly little pony can sure run.
Yeah. Well, they're into the turn, Chester.
Hey, Mr. Dillon, what happened?
Oh, look, Howland Dog dropped his blanket.
Why, he's naked as a jaybird.
Come on, you Indian, ride!
Come on, Howling Dog, come on!
He's doing it, Chester! He's doing it! He's doing it!
And Miss Kitty, I got to laugh so hard I coughed the hiccup. Oh, my. Oh, it was a sight, a sight. I tell you, oh, there's nothing quite as ineffectual as a man in long johns.
You know, I imagine Lieutenant Flagg will have some explaining to do when Colonel Benson sees
Oh,
him.
I wish I'd been there.
Oh, my, no place for a lady, Kitty.
You know, Howland Dog just sat there while Flagg cursed and begged, but then when the lieutenant paid off, he just turned and rode away.
With most of the lieutenant's uniform draped around his shoulders.
You know, Mr. Dillon, he sure seemed pretty calm about it all.
Well, he was sure enough of his horse, Chester.
Sure he'd win, you mean?
Well, sure, that's right.
Well, why, Matt? Army horses are pretty good stock.
Well, sure they are, Kitty, but there's always one around somewhere that's better, and Howland Dog has it.
Well, if that horse is so good, Matt, why doesn't Holland Dog clip him up some so he don't look like a goat?
Doc, let me tell you something. Howland Dog's been winning races with that horse for a long time now. He's been to half the army posts on the frontier.
What?
He has?
Well,
That's right.
Well, why don't people learn not to bet against him then?
Well, Chester, because lots of them are like Lieutenant Flagg. They gotta make fun of somebody that looks weaker or different than they do.
well, now, Matt, you said you knew about this before.
Yeah.
Did you know old Howling Dog was going to win today out there?
Well, Doc, I was just sure enough to win a $50 bet from Lieutenant Mole. Sam, see what the gentleman will have.
So, Mike, would an Indian ever do what our Indian chief did?
Well, I would say that it's highly possible because the Indians weren't as shy about their bodies as Europeans were. As I mentioned earlier, I've been doing a lot of research on Lewis and Clark, that expedition, and really the arrogance of Meriwether Lewis in talking to the Indians was extraordinary. And the reaction of the Indians was even more telling. They would listen to him and then, do their own thing after he got through pontificating. It really is. The Indians are a culture that were here for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. They weren't stupid. They had their own culture. They knew what they wanted to do. And I have no doubt that there is a distinct possibility that a wily old Indian chief like that would have a trick or two up his sleeve.
All right. So we were talking about, before the show, we were talking about the possibility of a horse actually existing in that part of Kansas at that time. And your thought was most definitely that the lieutenant would have such a horse. I guess the question remains, could a Mustang beat a thoroughbred?
Well, I'll have to plead knowing not that much about horses to make that decision, but I can see how a Mustang ridden better than a thoroughbred could win such a race.
And of course, the lieutenant with his fancy saddle and riding gear and big-legged beast with, 10, 15 hands high, who knows?
Yeah.
A huge horse, thought there was no way. He had no thought that this little Mustang thing could even keep up with him, let alone beat him. One thing I do know about the Mustang breed is that they are preferred by rodeo riders for barrel racing.
Because they're very agile. My experience with horses is the quarter horse, which to me is one of the finest breeds around. But I have no doubt that the Mustang could do what was depicted in the story if ridden by an expert rider, which clearly the chief was.
The general area and life at that time in the 1880s, does GunSmoke do a good job of that, do you think?
Oh, yes, it does. I mean, you got to remember that Dodge City was the confluence of certain elements that brought the term of the Wild West. You had money, cattle, the center for fur trade, the center for buffalo trade. And all those elements, those occupations are done by hard, tough men. So you mix that together and bring them all to town with money. Well, you can imagine what's going to happen. And so it was truly a Wild West area. It wasn't really tamed till about 1895 when some very famous lawmen came in and they were called the Guardsmen, and they literally brought law and order to Dodge City. Before that, there were many famous lawmen who went through Dodge City, for different stints as marshals or deputy marshals or other police, the deputy sheriffs and so forth, who did their thing and kept a lid on things, but they didn't really tame it.
What was the West like at that time, the 1880s?
Well, you had a whole lot of space, and you had people who were claiming that space for their mainly cattle ranches and so forth. And because of that, you had those cattle ranches had to employ people, and that was the cowboy. And the cowboy was truly an itinerant person. He went from ranch to ranch. As long as he was being treated fairly at a particular ranch, he'd stay there until things, because there were hard times and good times, and things were too hard where they couldn't make the payroll, then he'd move on. As cowboys traveled around, if you rode into a ranch and you had all the trappings of a cowboy, even if they couldn't give you a job, they'd give you a meal and a bunk for the night and then let you move on. It was an itinerant community who knew each other. I mean, you'd go from outfit to outfit, and there's bound to be cowboys you knew from previous employment, and so that's how it went. And so, in terms of what it was like for the cowboy, that's what it was like. In town, you had peaceful towns that grew up in areas where the money wasn't flowing so heavily, and people were trying to establish calm societies. But in the towns like Dodge City, Las Vegas, New Mexico, other such towns, the infamous Deadwood, where money and rough men came together, it was a true Wild West atmosphere, not exaggerated at all.
There were quite a few actual amazing cowboys out there, weren't there?
Oh, yes, there were. Absolutely. And they were really the backbone of the American West, because they were actually producing something and creating wealth through the cattle ranch. I mean, cattle ranching and the cattle industry is what made the West. And it wasn't until communication systems got to the point where more things like finances and so forth came in. And then, of course, the opening of the West to settlement was also what pushed things further to beyond the cattle industry into what we know today.
Has today's cowboy been tamed, or are they tough and rough like they always were?
Well,
and if you don't want to answer, I understand.
No. The cowboy is an independent person. And the cowboys I worked with were the salt of the earth, the vast majority of them. They were good men, working hard. They were rough men, because it's a rough business. And the younger ones would go to town on Friday or Saturday night, and they'd kick up their heels. And some of them would end up in jail, and the owner of the ranch would have to go in and bail them out and so forth. And he'd make sure they made their court dates and so forth. But there were and I was doing this out just northwest of Prescott, Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
And Prescott had its share of fistfights at the local saloons and so forth on Friday and Saturday nights.
Well, isn't that the kind of the history of the rodeo? It was more or less a battle zone for the early cowboy, and then it just kind of became more an arena than anything else.
Yeah, well, what happened with the rodeos is that forever, cowboys were always trying to match their skills against other cowboys. Mm-hmm. And then it took some enterprising businessman to put it together as a rodeo and make some money off it, you know. And so that's how, but I mean, the idea, like in our story, that there would be gambling over a horse race, that went on all the time.
I'm sure.
Gambling was a favorite occupation of the people in the American West back then.
Well, and there was a lot of prestige involved, too. If you were the best rider and told everybody you were the best rider, then somebody would come along and say, okay, prove to me you're the best rider.
That's right. But it's also the same as the lawmen back then. If you were a lawman with some reputation as being fast on the gun and tough, you always had job offers. Same with the cowboy. If you were known as a great cowboy, you always had job offers. So that was one of the reasons for having these contests, so you could prove to people how good you were.
Well, is there anything else that you want to tell us that we didn't cover about the episode or about cowboys, Indians, that I should have asked a question about?
Well, I'll just tell the listeners this. There really was a Long Branch Saloon in Dodge City. You didn't have a visual too much in the radio show, but if you ever saw the cowboy show, the TV show, the Long Branch Saloon, the real one, was actually larger and much fancier than the one depicted in the TV show. But it had its share of exciting times. There were several famous gunfights in it. The other thing about Dodge City is some of the most famous lawmen in the West went through there from time to time. Wyatt Earp, Pat Masterson, Charlie Bassett, and the most famous and probably the best lawman of them all back then, Bill Tillman, all went through there. So it's an interesting history for a city like that.
We know that you were in law enforcement for many, many years. If you had been born in the 1880s, would you have been a lawman or a cowboy?
Strange you should ask that question. I've often said that I should have been born so I could have been a deputy U.S. Marshal back in those days.
Is that something that you think that you'd love to do even today?
Yeah. I mean, you're independent and you went off. Those guys didn't have time to go after petty criminals. They went after the bad guys.
Yeah, and Mike, I got to say, anyone I've ever met, I would see you as being a Matt Dillon or, so that type of character, being able to go out and people say, "Yes, sir, Mr. Dillon." They would say, "Yes, sir, Mr. McNeff."
And my police career, I've had them say different things to me.
Well, that I can't control, and it is a family show.
Yeah, I know. But no, I think about that all the time. So thanks for asking that question. It's one that I think about often.
Well, Mike, can you give us kind of a rundown of what you got going and anything new that's going on with you?
Well, I'm just about finishing the third installment to the Robin Marlette series. It's the first book in a 3-book series. And I'm researching more for the next Jasper Lee story. And I've written some short stories for some anthologies where I'm doing my favorite thing. I'm researching history and then building a story around it. And that's the most favorite thing I like to do.
For the listeners, though, that particular series is very close to you because that's what you did for 20, whatever, more than 20 years.
Well, the first book is. The subsequent books are my imagination taking flight.
But still, you lived that life, that actual DEA agent type life in the dealing with drugs and dealing with tough situations.
I did.
And so I encourage my listeners to read those books. They are fantastic. Excellent reads, as is Hard Justice, your Western novel.
Yep. Well, I thank you for the compliment.
And how could people get a hold of you if they want to find out more about you?
Well, my website is mike.mcneff is up now. It was down for a while because it had to be redone. And so I'll be putting works on that. And I'm on @Mike_McNeff on Twitter and Mike McNeff on Facebook.
Well, I want to thank you for being on the show, Mike, and we'll have all those links in the show notes for you. You're welcome to come back the next time we do a GunSmoke or we do a police story.
I'd be more than happy to come back.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
I hope that you enjoyed today's roundup. My thanks to Mike McNeff for joining us today and giving us a better view of what life was really like in the Old West. We have some cool events coming up in the show, and if you want to find out more about that, why not follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, or sign up for the weekly newsletter. All the links you'll need for these are on the main website at raspodcast.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's amazing stories.